Hello everyone and welcome to this pilot edition, no pun intended, of Aeronautica, the show where we take a look at the aircraft of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. This is Remleiz from 40k Theories.
And hi, this is Fiaura the Tank Girl from that channel you all hate.
And as you can tell, this is going to be a show that's very much in the same vein as the previous Blitzkrieg and Men-at-Arms series where we took a look at tanks and infantry respectively. So now we're moving on to aircraft, and this week we're going to start off with Space Marine aircraft. Sorry, carry on.
Before you jump into the Thunderhawk on me, the way we're going to approach all of these vehicles is as follows. I need to see how well they can potentially fly, what they can do to maneuver and avoid damage as well. Their armament is going to be the next step in determining their capability. Lastly, I'm going to look at how well they will react to being hit. During this, I also look at the utility and how physically possible the claims of their speed, maneuverability, weapon, and other capabilities are versus what is represented by the statistics provided, the models themselves, and the descriptions of how they work. For testing each model, by the way, we either had to borrow one from the store or build a replica using foam bodies and plastic plates and place them into wind tunnels to get accurate lift-to-drag ratios. This was done at Rutgers University of Department of Engineering. So I had to do a lot of extra work for these.
Indeed, so don't say we don't go out to make sure we try and get as much accurate information as possible. But yes, as Fiaura stated, we're going to start off by looking at the Thunderhawk, which is probably the iconic aircraft used by the Space Marines. There are two main versions of this. You have the Thunderhawk gunship, which is the standard pattern, and the Thunderhawk transporter. The Thunderhawk gunship is able to carry 30 Space Marines or around 15 Terminators or jump pack equipped assault marines. The ship's weaponry include 4 twin-linked heavy bolters, which includes 2 turrets mounted on the front wingspans and 2 turrets on the wings, a twin-linked las cannon, and a turbo laser or a battle cannon, and can carry up to 6 Hellstrike missiles, which in some versions can be replaced with heavy bombs. The Thunderhawk transporter is used for deploying vehicles, and as such, it's actually less well equipped in regards to weaponry. It only has the twin-linked heavy bolters. The most notable difference is that it's missing the normal transport hold found on a Thunderhawk gunship, and is instead equipped with 4 magnetic clamps mounted underneath the fuselage, which allow it to transport either 2 Rhino or 1 Land Raider sized vehicle, as well as potentially carrying pods for ammunition, fuel, or other supplies.
Okay, so this one we had an actual model for. We didn't have to build foam, or we didn't have to use foam and plastic plates. I hate to start this off this way, but this one has no aerodynamically redeeming quality whatsoever, and weighs 121 tons. I'm going to explain, to take a few moments to explain this. So at 121 tons, we have to do some rocket and jet science and use a formula that is the following. Thrust over weight equals maximum static thrust at sea level divided by maximum takeoff weight to determine how much thrust it takes to get this thing off the ground. Then for cruising speeds, we take thrust divided by weight equals lift to drag ratio under 1. So all of that with 1 in order to determine exactly how many newtons of force are required to get this thing off the ground or to get it traveling at its traveling speed. Again, we had to take this down to a wind tunnel and see how the drag worked in a wind tunnel. The answer is the space shuttle is referred to as the flying brick or the flying potato, and it has a better lift to drag ratio than this thing.
Oh dear.
We need roughly 9.8 kilonewtons per ton of force per ton an aircraft weighs in order to lift the aircraft off the ground on Earth to overcome gravity. To lift 121 tons will require roughly 1,185,800 newtons of force, or 1,185.8 kilonewtons, with a lift-to-drag ratio of 4.68. Which means that for a Thunderhawk to reach cruising altitude and cruising speed would require 5,549,544 newtons. That's about 20 times what an F-14 Tomcat takes.
So, yeah.
All of these assume Earth gravity, by the way. If you have lighter or heavy gravity, that changes dynamics. If you have thinner or thicker atmospheres, that also changes the dynamics. So, they had to design those engines to be massively overpowered to get it to move. The phrase, if you stick an engine big enough on it, anything will fly, comes to mind. You can calculate this yourself if you so wish by taking the total takeoff weight of the object, 121 tons, multiply it by the lift-to-drag ratio, then multiply it by the gravity of the planet you wish to achieve lift and flight on, then multiply that by 0.2 meters in order to achieve acceleration to break atmosphere. Basically, you're adding 0.2 meters per second required to break atmosphere from the gravity you're working against. Now for its ability to run from opponent. Considering it flies like a brick, this vehicle would not be able to dodge anything. It would be really good at moving in straight lines at high speed. However, in Warhammer 40k, that speed isn't all that high. 2,000 kilometers comes out to 1.62 Mach. To compare that with a modern aircraft from Vietnam, the F-14 Tomcat flies at 2.4 Mach, or Mach 1.4 with its wings deployed for combat. Not to mention that its lift-to-drag is 0.85 versus the 4.68. The turning radius of a Thunderhawk is 172,992 meters, or 172.99 kilometers, to turn 180 degrees at full speed.
That's a pretty large turning circle.
You could drive across the state of Alabama in the United States, and that would just be how far it took you to turn around.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. I didn't know it was going to be this bad.
Armament-wise, this thing is armed with more weapons than an Aegis destroyer, and that's an ocean-faring ship. Except it flies, allegedly.
In fairness, the Thunderhawk can also perform non-atmospheric void flight as well, so in space it'll be absolutely no problem, I would assume.
In space it would be absolutely no problem. The one problem I had with it with space combat is range. It apparently can only go 30,000 kilometers, which everyone thinks, oh, 30,000 kilometers, that's really good! Except when you're talking in space at ranges that go up to hundreds of thousands of kilometers. This would be an extremely close-range landing craft. And when I say extremely close range, and for Battlefleet Gothic purposes, for instance, one unit of measurement is 20,000 kilometers. So for every inch, that's 20,000 kilometers of people shooting at each other.
So in Battlefleet Gothic, a Thunderhawk can only move just over an inch.
Just an inch and a half would be its effective movement before it's out of gas. Now that's in atmosphere. Outside in space, we add about 1.8 times. So you're talking about 2 inches in terms of actual movement on the board, or roughly 40,000 kilometers, maybe 45,000 before it's out of gas. And this is a reminder that in Battlefleet Gothic purposes, ships engage each other at up to 200,000 kilometers. It would make a great close-range defense fortress to fend off enemy bombers, or an extremely close-range, or even an ambush craft to deliver strike missions, but with that short range, I'm not quite sure how well that's going to work. But it has all the DACA in the world. I mean, it can literally blast entire small carrier. A modern carrier group would not have as much firepower as a single squadron of these things.
Well, there you go then.
The only other consideration I have to make here is that it makes no consideration. We could not find a spot anywhere on it for mid-air or mid-flight refueling. I'm not sure if that was intentional, if it's hidden behind a panel, or if it just doesn't have that capability. But if it had that capability, that would definitely provide it with a significant enhancement.
Fair enough. Okay. So moving on to the next ship on our list, it's the Storm Raven gunship. Now, the Storm Raven gunship is much smaller than the Thunderhawk gunship and is also supposed to be much more agile, thanks to its wide array of vectored thrusters. It's this maneuverability that makes it an ideal support craft in environments such as the crowded spires of Hive cities, where the deployment of Thunderhawks would be impractical or simply stupid. Its default loadout is a twin-linked heavy bolter, a twin-linked assault cannon, and 4 Bloodstrike or Stormstrike missiles, which can be reconfigured depending upon mission parameters or commander's personality. It can carry up to a squad of up to 12 power-armoured Space Marines, half dozen jump-pack-equipped Assault Marines, as well as a Dreadnought in the vehicle's rear magnetic grapple.
Now, this one we had someone's custom hand-built model for. We did not actually have an official Games Workshop model, but at the same time it made it where we didn't have to build a foam plastic mock-up. It's a better candidate for flying compared to the Thunderhawk with the vector thrusters. However, if you're expecting it to fly and not constantly be using the vector thrusters, it won't. The wingspan is virtually non-existent. Without vector thrusters, it has a lift-to-drag ratio that's actually worse than the Thunderhawk at 4.71, which is just slightly worse off. But it only weighs 68 tons!
Now, put into perspective about how much a regular aircraft would weigh.
A regular aircraft. Let's take an F-14 Tomcat, because that's what I've been using for a lot of comparisons. An F-14 Tomcat only weighs about 2.2 tons, fully loaded. And only requires 93,000 newtons to get off the ground, or 20,900 force pounds. This aircraft requires 3,138,774 newtons, or roughly 100,000 force pounds just to get off the ground.
Right.
It has armor. It's basically the armor thickness of it is basically makes it into a flying Lehman Russ, which for an aircraft is insane. Most aircraft are literally made of paper. There's a few notable exceptions: the Apache attack helicopter and the Warthog A-10 gunship are pretty durable. But for the most part, when an aircraft is hit with something, it just flies apart into little pieces and it's dead. This thing could probably take a tank cannon and keep moving.
This thing could probably realistically just ram through other aircraft, potentially as well.
Yes, this is one of the few times when I have to admit that ramming is a viable option for an airplane. I never thought I'd say that.
Just wait till we get to walks.
Again, it's limited by a range of 30,000 kilometers, which is not very far in space. And we could not find a point for mid-air refueling. I'm assuming it's behind... I'm going to give it credit and just assume that the mid-air refuel's behind a panel. But we can only hope. The only other thing with it is it actually has a worse turning radius than the Thunderhawk if the vector thrusters are not turned on, and that is 179.2 kilometers to do a full speed 180. It has firepower, again, of basically a flying Lehman Russ, armor of a flying Lehman Russ. I think they just took a Lehman Russ and put wings on it.
It probably wouldn't surprise me. To any of you watching thinking some of these things are just flying bricks, don't worry, we'll get to the flying brick later, because there isn't actually a flying brick on here.
Actually, to illustrate this, we're getting to the flying brick right now.
Oh, we're already getting to the Cestus Assault Ram, are we?
I think that's next.
We can do that. I actually had on my list being actually the Storm Talon, I think it was.
Storm Talon. Ooh. Yes. Let's
so we'll save the brick for later, just to give you a tease. But yes, the Storm Talon. Now, this is a one-man flyer employed by Space Marines, naturally, to be used as an air-to-air interceptor and ground attack aircraft. It's swift enough to engage most enemy aircraft and also packs a heavy armament of assault cannons, missile launchers, heavy bolters, and other weaponry. It's a versatile vehicle capable of serving as an escort to protect Space Marine assets on the battlefield or as a close support attack craft.
Everybody ready? This one actually flies!
Bloody hell.
With a lift to drag of 1.79, it flies about as well as a crippled P-51 prop plane. Using vector thrusting similar to a Peregrine and its versatile changing directional engines, it is able to actually fly as a Vistol. That is a short. It could not necessarily fly as a VTOL unless those engines literally were giant space rockets. However, it could fly as a Vistol. That is a short vertical landing and takeoff, where it has a short takeoff ramp and can actually vertically land. Firepower-wise, it packs about as much firepower as an attack helicopter. Kind of what I expected it to be packing, with a chin-mounted minigun and two missile pods. As far as acting as an interceptor, I think that's where we come into a problem. It's not fast enough. According to the statistics I managed to dig up, it only does 2,200 kilometers per hour, which for an interceptor is pathetically slow, especially in an age of jets and rockets. But if that's as fast as the Warhammer 40k universe has for aircraft, that's as fast as it has for aircraft. Now, I did find some interesting variants of this thing in that there's one variant where they take the body of it and replace the engines with legs, and that kind of scared me horrifically, because the thought of this thing becoming a transformer would destroy all of its ability to fly.
I kind of want to see that now, though.
I will include the image inside of the video for you guys. It's right there. But this thing, I can't really fault it. It flies. It has a decent amount of punch, and it's a practical use aircraft. There you go. We had one that actually can fly.
That's good to see. At least something can fly. Let's see if the next one can fly. The Stormhawk Interceptor. Now, Stormhawks are specialised gunships closely related to the Storm Talon pattern that excels in aerial superiority. The frontal armour and huge firepower makes the Stormhawk an excellent dogfighter, hurtling through clouds to execute target after target in a blazing display of incendiary defiance. Now, they boast impressive firepower, including twin assault cannons, Icarus storm cannons, las cannons, twin heavy bolters, Typhoon missile launchers or Skyhammer missile launchers, and an Infernum halo launcher.
Okay, once again, this one actually flies, and it flies rather well. It actually is the only aircraft on the list to drop below 1 for lift-to-drag ratio.
Bloody hell.
So it can actually fly, maneuver, and do the descripted job. I did find 2 variants of this, one with engines completely underneath housings, and one where the housings pop up in the middle of the wings. We tested both of them and found the ones with the engines completely encased in housings and not popping up in the middle of the wings was the better flyer. So I went with testing it instead of the other one. I could be wrong, but that's the one we went with testing. It does fly. It flies relatively well. The cockpit is actually angled correctly to deflect wind, assuming that it's nosed down when in flight. If it's actually nosed neutral, then in fact the cockpit is acting as a giant wind screen rather than a nice little arc for the wind to go up over and avoid dragging the aircraft down. The armament, it's actually not going to require a lot to get off the ground. It only requires roughly 118,000 newtons of force, which is only slightly higher than a modern aircraft to get off the ground. So, good job. And it has a turning circle of 3.7 kilometers, which is just outside the reach of an F-16's turning circle. So our version of an interceptor versus their version of an interceptor, our version is still turning better and flying faster, but they're
not
close.
as heavily armed.
Definitely not as heavily armed or anywhere near that kind of amount of firepower coming out of it. It does have that going for it. It has firepower and it actually boasts some armor. There are certain sections of it that were observed to just be armored plates, which, for an aircraft, if you can get it to fly, not a bad job getting it to fly.
So all in all, we actually have one that would actually work, theoretically.
Theoretically, yes. It would work better if they made the wings a bit flatter or vectored the wings at all. But theoretically, it would work. It would actually fly. It would be capable of doing its job, and it has the firepower to back up its threat.